Hi everybody, today we're making sticky date pudding. This is a fantastic dessert just to have on a Saturday night with friends or family, or if you need to get yourself out of trouble because you've been a bit naughty, this could be a good way to bribe your parents. First of all though, we need to start with putting our hair up, putting on an apron, washing our hands for 20 seconds with hot soapy water, and also making sure we have some clean tea towels and dishcloths, and removing any jewellery. So let's get started and do that first. And here we are ready to start. The next thing you need to do is get out all of your ingredients and your equipment. So check the ingredient list for what you need to get out. So now that I have everything in front of me, I'll quickly go through what you're going to need. You need 3/4 cups of dates, you need 250 ml of water, you need 1 teaspoon of bicarb soda and 60 grams of butter. You need 3/4 cup of caster sugar. When I'm measuring that, I'm going to use a 1/2 cup and 1/4 cup. You need 2 eggs and 1 cup of self-raising flour. Now that's for the main part for the puddings. And then for the sauce, you're going to need some brown sugar, cream, and some butter, but we'll worry about them a little bit later. The first thing you need to do is to chop up your pitted dates. So I'm going to just tip them out onto the board, maybe just a few at a time. Now underneath my board, I have a little non-slip mat so that my board doesn't wiggle around too much and it's a bit safer. And I'm just going to cut each date in half and then in half again and just put that to one side. Okay, make sure you keep your fingers out of the way and just do that for all the dates. I'm going to put the dates all into about a medium-sized saucepan and 250 ml of water, which I have already measured out. Can also go straight into the saucepan, and that goes onto a medium heat and bring it to the boil, and when it comes to the boil we'll add the bicarb soda. I have also lined my muffin tins with some patty pans, and I'm just going to lightly spray each one with some oil. Probably best to do this over the sink so you don't get oil everywhere. The next thing to do is to measure the rest of your ingredients, but just a quick reminder, if you haven't preheated your oven yet, make sure it is turned on to 180 degrees Celsius. Now, I'm going to measure out 1 teaspoon of bicarb soda. Make sure you use a flat edge knife to level off. And just keep that ready for when the dates have come to the boil and you're ready to mix that in together. So my dates have come to the boil, so I'm just going to sprinkle in the bicarb. And you'll see that there's a chemical reaction that occurs straight away, and that's bicarb soda being released, and that will help make your puddings really nice and light and airy a little bit later. We need to transfer this into another bowl so that it can cool down. So just put that to the side and we'll use it a little bit later. Next we need to weigh out the butter. Now, if you have a look on the side of this butter, you can see there's different measurements. There's 50 grams, 100 grams, and so on. Now, because we need 60 grams for this, I have got my scales that I will measure, but what you actually can do is just take your knife and just cut just slightly past the 50 gram measurement. And when I measure it, it'll probably be quite close to 60 grams. So I'm going to turn on my scales. Make sure it is on 0, so you can press the tare button so it's on 0, and then place it in. I'm going to actually put that in there so I don't dirty my scale bowl. And it's 63, that's pretty close. So if you don't have scales, that's a good way that you can always measure out your butter. A little bit later, I'm going to need more butter for the sauce, so I'm going to weigh that out now. So I've got a different container in there. I'm going to press tare so it's on 0, and I'm going to weigh out 80 grams this time. And even though I don't need it yet, 78, that's a pretty good guess. 79 actually, I'll just get a little bit more, and that will be used for the sauce. So next we're going to cream the butter and sugar together. So the butter can go in there. Now my butter is room temperature, which means it'll be really nice and soft to beat. If yours has just come out of the fridge, it might be a bit firm. So you might need to put it in the microwave just to soften. So I would suggest do 10 seconds and check it, 10 seconds again and check it, but be careful not to melt it. Now to measure out the sugar, that's 1/2 cup and 1/4 cup to get 3/4 cup. So again, make sure you level it off. Okay, now the other thing I've been doing is as I've finished with each ingredient, I've been putting it back in the cupboard so that I'm cleaning up as I go. So good practice to do that as well. Have my beaters ready, and I'm going to start off on a slow speed, and then I'll slowly increase it. Now what you're trying to do is you're trying to dissolve the sugar into the butter, and you want it to be nice and light and fluffy. Don't go too fast at the start, otherwise sugar will flick everywhere. You can see it's sort of starting to come together a bit, but it's still bright yellow. So when you're creaming butter and sugar, you want it to become a pale colour, and it should look like a bit like whipped cream. So this needs a little bit longer. Okay, once you're happy with your butter and sugar, then we need to add the egg. So we're going to crack them into a separate bowl for a start. Eggs are best at room temperature when you're baking. And then you can use a fork just to beat them up together before you add them in. Now with the egg, we just want to add in a little bit at a time. So I'm just going to pour in a little bit, put it aside, and then beat this up. And probably about 30 seconds in between each addition. Important as well to have a cake scraper to scrape down the edges. Then add a bit more egg. And you keep doing that until you've used up all of your egg and you have a really nice light and fluffy mixture that is aerated. Now those air bubbles that you've created is what will make your puddings nice and light and fluffy, because those air pockets will heat up and expand, and that's what makes your puddings rise. I'm just scraping down my sides and just going to add in my last little bit of egg, and then I'll beat that all together one last time. Now when you're finished with your beaters like we have now, the best way to make sure you don't wreck your beaters is to remove these properly, and that's by pressing that in and releasing them like that. If you just yank them out, you can break your beaters. So make sure you release them properly before you wash them. For safety reasons, never ever put this part in water, just wash the actual beater part. Next you need to measure out 1 cup of self-raising flour. So make sure when you're measuring that you dip it in and just tilt that so you can see. Tap to get out any air pockets, scrape it off so it's nice and level. A sifter is always a good idea, helps aerate the flour and remove any lumps. And then with a large spoon, we want to fold that flour in. And when you're folding, you use that rotation. So you put the big spoon in and flip the mixture back onto itself. Now folding just means it's a really gentle way of combining the flour without losing any air. So if you push back and forth or if you stir it, you'll lose some air. Now we still need to add the date mixture, so I'm not going to fold this in completely. And by now my date mixture is nice and cool. So I've only partly folded that in, and I'm going to add the dates. Use the scraper to scrape out all the dates, because this is your moist part of the recipe. And continue to fold in until it's all combined and of a uniform colour. You might need to scrape out the centre of the spoon and even scrape down the sides of the bowl. and then do one final mix. Now don't overmix it, because that can make your puddings become a little bit tough. So to keep them nice and light, as soon as all that's combined, you stop mixing. I'm going to transfer my mixture into a jug. It'll be easier to transfer into the patty pans. It won't all fit, so I'm just going to do it in 2 separate batches. So this mixture is runny, almost like a pouring mixture, and probably helps to have a spoon to guide. But you then just pour it in to each patty pan until you've used up all of your mixture. Just putting in the second lot now. Scrape out your bowl properly. If you find some are fuller than others, you can even them out a little bit by just transferring a little mixture across. Okay, as you can see, I've used my plastic scraper to scrape out the jug and my bowl so there's no waste left in there. And I have made all of my puddings fairly much the same. Okay, these now go into the oven for 20 minutes. Set your timer, keep an eye on them, and while they're in the timer, we're going to make the sauce and do some dishes. The sauce is pretty straightforward. You just need half a cup of brown sugar. So again, make sure you level off evenly with brown sugar. You measure it a little bit differently. You do pat it down a bit like a sandcastle and level that off into the saucepan. Now remember earlier we measured out the 80 grams of butter. Now you can just cut that up a little bit so it melts a bit quicker. Mine's quite soft, so it should be okay. And you need 125 mils of cream. I always like to use a measuring jug when I'm measuring liquid ingredients like cream. So just 125 mils straight in, and then we take it over to the heat and we put it on about a medium heat and we stir it constantly and bring it to the boil. Okay, so mine's been on the heat for a minute or so and the butter is starting to melt and you can start to see some small bubbles. I have it on a medium-sized hot plate, not my largest one because I have a medium-sized saucepan. I just stir it constantly. Once it comes to the boil, I turn it down to low and it needs to simmer for 3 minutes. So make sure you set your timer so that you know the exact amount of time when the 3 minutes is up. Mine is now simmering, so you can see there's just some small gentle bubbles breaking the surface, and I've set my timer now, so I'm now just stirring it occasionally and just keeping an eye on it while that just cooks away. My sauce is ready, so I'm just transferring it into my jug. This is the jug I used earlier, so I've washed it and dried it and using it again. And I'll just keep that aside until my puddings are ready. So my little cakes are ready now, and I've let them sit just for about 5 minutes to cool down, and then you can transfer them onto a cooling rack. Just gently take them out and pop them on the rack, and then let them cool down completely, or you can serve them nice and hot. These warm up really well, so if you don't eat them straight away and you want them for dessert later, they can microwave for 30 seconds, 40 seconds to heat up, and this sauce also heats up really well as well, so you can do that a bit later. Now to serve these, peel off the wrapper and place it in a bowl. Then serve it with some vanilla ice cream on the side and pour some of the sauce over the top. And you have a delicious sticky date pudding, a huge crowd pleaser. And as I said earlier, it might get you out of trouble if you've been a bit naughty for your parents. So make this for them and you win them over. Have an awesome day, everybody, and happy cooking.